presenter is Caleb Rogers, and he's going to be presenting on fishing.
Hello, my name is Caleb Rogers, and welcome to my presentation on striped bass fishing in the Long Island Sound. Before I talk about fishing, I will give you an overview of my project. I chose this topic for my project because fishing is one of my favorite ways to spend my free time, and I wanted to learn more about fishing, especially striped bass fishing, as that is one of my favorite fish to catch. I wanted to learn effective methods and techniques to fish for these fish and hopefully get a better understanding of striped bass and how to fish for them. To accomplish my project, I did a lot of research on many different fishing methods and techniques to properly perform these methods to catch striped bass in the Long Island Sound. I used this research to attempt to catch striped bass in the Long Island Sound to find out which method worked the best for me during this time of year. Now, I will share with you some information I found from my research about striped bass, more commonly called stripers, and their scientific name is Merone saxatilis. So, where do stripers live? Well, they originally lived on the east coast of North America, from the St. Lawrence River in Canada to the St. Johns River in Florida. Some are also native to the Gulf of Mexico, from Florida to Louisiana. Now, many stripers have been introduced to many lakes and reservoirs in the United States and Mexico. Some are even found on the west coast. What do stripers look like? Here are some pictures of stripers caught in the Long Island Sound. As you can see, like most fish, they have a darker color on top that is usually a dark green or olive color, or maybe a grayish color, or almost a bluish color, or some other similar color depending on the fish, and most of them will have either 7 or 8 stripes on their side. And here are a couple more pictures. Stripers are large fish when fully grown. The world record striped bass is currently 81 pounds and 14 ounces. This striper was caught in the Long Island Sound off the coast of Westbrook, Connecticut. This shows that the Long Island Sound is a great place to fish for striped bass. The current Connecticut striped bass regulations allow anglers to keep stripers between 28 and 32 inches. This regulation is good to have in place due to overfishing. At that size, these fish are about 1/3 of the way through their life, at around 8 to 10 years old. Stripers can live to be 30 years old, and they grow for their entire life. The life cycle of striped bass is interesting because stripers are anadromous fish. This means that they can live for most of their lives in saltwater, but will migrate up freshwater rivers to breed. This is why you can find striped bass in freshwater lakes, because they can handle both fresh and salt water. When the striped bass migrates upriver in springtime, the mature females that are over 4 years old can produce up to 500,000 eggs. When these eggs are produced, the eggs are fertilized by a mature male that is over 2 years old. Then the eggs will begin to drift downstream as striped bass larvae hatch and feed on zooplankton. These larvae will grow into baby stripers, and once they reach the river delta, they will grow into juvenile stripers. These juvenile striped bass tend to stay in sounds and estuaries for about 2 to 4 years before migrating. Stripers will migrate based on the season. In the spring, stripers will migrate north as the water warms up, and they will migrate up freshwater rivers to spawn. In the summer, stripers will stay up north in the cooler water until fall, when the water becomes too cold for their liking. Stripers, especially the larger ones, will spend the winter farther south in warmer waters. Some striped bass, even mature ones, will spend the whole year in the same area. These are called holdover bass, and anglers will fish for them even in the winter. What do stripers eat? Well, stripers are predators and will eat almost any small fish they can find. This includes, and is not limited to, menhaden, more commonly known as bunker, in the area, herring, anchovies, and alewives. Stripers will also eat many other sea life like eels, squid, mussels, clams, sandworms, and bloodworms. Now, I'll get to the fishing. Let's start with the basic equipment used for striped bass fishing. Striped bass fishing requires a rod, reel, fishing line, and tackle. Here's a picture of some fishing rods and reels set up on a boat. First, the rods. Striped bass are big fish, so a fairly sturdy rod is required. A medium-heavy rod is usually pretty sturdy and good for striped bass fishing on most occasions. When fishing for striped bass, different rods are used for different techniques. For example, if you are trolling, you may want a fairly long, sturdy rod. If you are casting, you may not want such a sturdy rod. If you are dropping down and fishing the bottom, you may want a shorter rod. There are two main kinds of reels used for striped bass fishing, the first being a spinning reel. Spinning reels are easy to cast and are harder to tangle the line with. Spinning reels are typically used for casting. Conventional reels are better for letting out fishing line for dropping down to the bottom or trolling. Conventional reels are usually not used as casting reels. To the right here, you can see an example of a spinning reel, spooled with braided line, which I will talk about shortly. Here are some more examples of spinning reels. Here's an example of a conventional style reel. And here's another example of a conventional reel. Now we'll talk about the line types. There are three main types of fishing line used: braided line, monofilament, and fluorocarbon. Braided line is fishing line that is like a string. It is a bunch of fibers braided together to make this line. Braid is usually a lot thinner than the other kinds of line, with the same strength. Monofilament line is clear, and the fish can't see it as well as braid. The line is thicker than the other two for the same strength. Fluorocarbon is similar to mono, but is usually stronger, and is almost invisible when underwater. This line is the most expensive, so it is not used as much, although it is arguably better. In this picture, you can see examples of three kinds of line. To the left, there is monofilament. In the middle, there is fluorocarbon, and to the right, there is braid. Terminal tackle. This tackle includes hooks, swivels, snaps, leaders, weights, beads, and many more. To the right, there are some different examples of different sized and shaped fishing weights. The size of the weight is chosen based on the current. You want just enough weight where the line is relatively vertical down to the bottom. Usually the smallest weight to achieve this goal is used depending on the rig. Here's an image of some different kinds and sized hooks. This is an example of a tackle box with terminal tackle inside. The top two rows have hooks, and the second to bottom has swivels, snaps, and plastic tubes attached to snaps for fish finder rigs. Fishing knots are used in making fishing rigs to tie tackle to line, spool line on a reel, and much more. Fishing knots are something an angler must know. The uni knot is a knot that can be used for a lot of different applications. You can use this knot to tie a lure to your line, tie a snap swivel to your line, tie the line to your reel, and even join two lines together with a double uni knot. The clinch knot is similar to the uni knot, but not as strong. It can be used for pretty much the same things as the uni knot, besides maybe tying two lines together. The palmer knot is usually used to tie a hook to your line or a lure. It can be used for other applications, but those are the main ones. Snelling a hook is used to attach a hook to a line. There are many other fishing knots besides these, so these are just a few examples. The picture on the bottom shows a uni knot tying a snap swivel to braided line. And here's an example of a snelled hook. Right here is the snell. These are different kinds of bait used to catch striped bass. Fishing with bait is a very popular method used to catch stripers. This is just the list from before that includes some of the creatures stripers eat. These creatures can be fished alive, or they can be fished dead or cut up. The picture to the right is an example of a bunch of frozen menhaden or bunker. Artificial baits can also be used. These are designed to look and smell like actual baits, but they're usually not as effective because they're not the real thing. Here are some examples of artificial baits. Now, to fish these baits, you will need to set up a bait rig. A rig is just an assortment of different fishing items set up in a way to catch fish. There are many different types of rigs used for live and dead bait. Some of the most popular for fishing with bait for striped bass are the high-low rig, the fish finder rig, and the three-way rig. The high-low rig consists of two hooks attached to a line coming off the main line. One hook is tied up higher and one is tied lower on the line, hence the name high-low. There is a weight at the bottom that is usually attached to a loop at the bottom of the rig. These rigs are usually made from monofilament line, two hooks, and a loop for a sinker. This rig is fished by dropping it down to the bottom and reeling up a little bit to avoid hitting the rocks in the bottom, as they can snag the sinker and scare away fish. This rig is usually fished from boats and drifted over a reef or other structure. These rigs are also used for shore fishing, where they are just casted out from shore. Here is an example of a high-low rig. It is fairly hard to see. This is the swivel that attaches to the main line. These are the two hooks, and here's the loop for the sinker at the end. The next rig is a fish finder rig. This rig uses a circle hook usually. This hook is shaped more like a circle and keeps the fish from swallowing the hook, and there is no need to set the hook. There is also a sliding sinker. This is the main part of the rig. It is a sinker attached to a line, usually with a clip and a sliding plastic tube. This sinker is attached to the main line. There is then a swivel that attaches a leader, usually made from monofilament, and a hook at the end. To fish this rig, bait is placed on the hook and the rig is dropped down to the bottom. The reel is left in free spool with the clicker on. This is usually used when anchored on a boat. The sinker sits in the bottom, and when a fish eats the bait and takes off with it, the line will come off of the reel and the sinker does not move as the sinker is still on the bottom and line is going through the loop. This fish does not notice the hook until you start to reel. This is called the fish finder rig because you know when a fish is on because of the clicker on the reel. The clicker is a feature most conventional reels have that make a noise when the spool is moving. To the right, there is an example of a fish finder rig, and to the bottom, there is a J-hook next to a circle hook. This one on the right is a circle hook, and the one to the left here is a J-hook. Next, there is the three-way rig. This rig is used to drift live eels and other big baits for big fish. This is called the three-way rig because it uses a three-way swivel. At one end of the three-way swivel, there are about 6 feet of strong monofilament line with a large circle hook at the end. The bait is put on the hook. The other part of the swivel has about a foot of line attached to a sinker. The rig is dropped down to the bottom and then reeled up a little bit so the sinker does not hit the bottom, for the same reasons as before. This rig is usually drifted over the reefs and structure. These rigs are used for live bait and dead baits. There are many different artificial lures that are made to look like and act like prey for striped bass. Soft plastics are bait made from, well, soft plastic. These baits are made to look a lot like something a striper would like to eat. Some of them are made to smell like bait. Deep divers are lures that when moving will dive deep into the water. They are usually made to look like bait fish swimming through the water, and will move side to side to trick fish into thinking it is a real fish swimming. They are usually used while trolling. Poppers are used on the surface of the water. That might look like an injured bait fish to stripers. Surface swimmers are like poppers, but are different because they do not pop out of the water the same way. Crankbaits are lures that look like fish that you cast out and reel or crank them in. The motion of this lure makes them look like swimming fish. Spoons are shiny metal lures that are reeled in and look like bait fish. The shiny look attracts stripers. Here are some examples of soft plastic lures. These type of lures are usually attached to a jig head that is just a hook with a weight attached, and it looks something like this. The middle picture shows the soft plastic rigged with a jig head already. The right image has a hook and weight inside of it because this is how that lure is made. These are examples of deep diving lures. The large plastic piece in front of the bait is called the lip. When the bait is moving, the large side of this lip makes the lure dive deep underwater. The lip also helps the bait look like it is swimming. The middle picture shows a deep diver with a joint. This joint allows the back part of the lure to move separately. This can make the motion of the lure look more like a real fish. Here are some poppers. These are a type of topwater lure, so they float on the surface. When retrieved, the shape of the front of the lure will disturb the water and make a splash. These will look like baitfish on the surface of the water. These are some more topwater lures. The left lure can be used as a walking bait. This is when the way the rod moves makes the bait move back and forth. These are just some more crankbaits or plugs, and have seen some uses, as you can see. These lures will dive slightly under the water because of the small lip. This lure is a spoon. It is shiny and swims like a baitfish in the water. The shiny nature of the lure attracts fish. These last lures are jigs. They can be used in many different ways, but are meant for jigging. Casting different lures is a method used to catch striped bass. A lure is attached to the end of your line and is casted out and reeled in. This motion, combined with the design and lip of the lure, will make the lure look and swim like a baitfish. This method is used from shore and from a boat. Many times, there is a group of seagulls or other birds diving into the ocean feeding on small baitfish. These baitfish are usually pushed up to the surface by larger fish like stripers that are also feeding on them. When stripers are on the surface, feeding out fish, it is called boiling, because it looks like water is boiling. When this is happening, it is a good opportunity to cast the lure in, because there is most likely stripers in the mix. Here is some drone footage I took of this in action. Trolling is another fishing method. This is when lures are dropped behind a boat while the boat is moving. The lures are then being moved by the boat. The fishing rods can then be set aside in a rod holder until a fish bites the lure. Lures that are used for this include deep divers and other various lures. Here is a picture of trolling in action. The rod and reel are in a rod holder while the boat is moving the lure. Here's a video of trolling. The rod used here is a little bendy for trolling, but it gets the job done. You can see the tip of the rod vibrating. This happens because the lure is moving back and forth to imitate a baitfish. Jigging is another fishing method that uses a jig lure as seen before. To perform this method, a jig is tied to the end of the fishing line and is dropped down to the bottom. Then the fishing rod is moved up fast and then back down. When the lure falls back down, it usually looks like prey that is now swimming to the bottom and attracts stripers. Now, where do people go to catch fish? They have to go to places where the fish are. Fish feel more comfortable in structure, so there will be more fish around a structure. A structure could be a reef, a shipwreck, rock piles, or a drop-off. To find structure, a chart can be used that will show different reefs and drop-offs. Another way to find structure is to look on the surface of the water. The current will rip over these structures and will make waves on the surface. This is like in a river or stream when the water moves over a rock. Another way to find fish is by looking for them. As I said earlier, flocks of birds diving into the water are a good sign of stripers or other predatory fish like bluefish feeding on small baitfish. Looking for a disturbance on the surface of the water, or boil, also means there are probably stripers feeding on bait fish close to the surface. A fish finder sonar can also be used to find fish. Here is an example of a fish finder. This will give you the depth of the water and will use sonar to show different things below you. The red at the bottom of the screen is the bottom of, in this case, the Long Island Sound. When fish are under the sonar, they will look like little arches of red color. So, the main techniques used to catch stripers are using live and or dead bait, casting lures, trolling lures, and jigging lures. I documented my fishing trips and tried all of these fishing methods. I did my fishing trips in early spring when the water is still cold, around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So because of the way stripers migrate, there are not many around the places I was able to fish. Many stripers were most likely still south of Connecticut in warmer water, or moving into the Connecticut River or other freshwater river to spawn. I was able to catch a few fish and document other fish caught by people with me on my fishing trips. All of these fish were caught using a high-low rig with sandworms as bait. Most of these fish were caught by drifting along drop-offs and reefs around Faulkner Island, about 3 miles off the shore of Guilford. And one of the fish I caught was caught close to the mouth of the Connecticut River. After learning more about the way stripers breed and migrate, I chose this fishing spot because stripers are expected to migrate upriver in early spring to spawn, so there should be plenty of fish there. The other fish I caught from shore was on a point. Points are a good spot to fish because bait fish usually like to spend time around them. They can move to either side of the point depending on the current, so striped bass like to be at the end of the point waiting for bait fish to move. What did I learn about my topic? While working on this project, I learned many things from my research. This includes learning more about striped bass and how they breed and migrate. These findings combined with other research allowed me to learn more about fishing for stripers in the Long Island Sound. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I can now answer any questions you may have.
Caleb, you did such an incredible job. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I loved the videos in the boat. I felt like I was on the boat enjoying it just as much as I could be there. Really impressed with the detail, all of the information that you got together. It was just really, really impressive. I can tell you put a lot of work into it.
Thank
For
you.
those of you tuning in, you can use the chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask questions or make comments, and I could read those aloud for you. The first one is from Mr. Masseni. This presentation was well presented, enough so that I actually think I can catch a striped bass, something I've been trying to do for so long. Nice job.
Thank you.
When did you first start fishing, Caleb? How old were you?
Young, probably like 3 years old at my grandparents' house in Minnesota for freshwater fish and stuff.
Wow, incredible. Well, the weather is getting better, so I'm sure you're going to be able to do so much more of that. We're really impressed with your work. I'm excited for you, and I hope that you continue your work on this. It was very well done.
Thank you.
This is from Lisa. Nice job, Caleb. All your hard work paid off.
Thank you.
And then this is from Mr. Sandora. Incredible narration. We should let National Geographic know. I agree. We should.